Hey guys, what's up? I'm back. In this video, I figured we would take a look at more hobby tools, and this time, since we went back and looked at classic hobby tools that you would need as a beginner, I figured this time we would look at hobby tools you would need with a little more experience under your belt, and you've been modeling for a little while, and you want to be able to do things that are a little more complicated. I'm going to show you some tools that are going to be able to help you out a bit. You're going to have to ignore some of the stuff I got in the background here. I'm between multiple projects and a couple commissions. So while I'm trying to get something done for a customer that's shaping up to be kind of tedious and hard, but doable, I got a lot of stuff in the background because of it, including a little entertainment ring. But first of all, let's go ahead and talk about something that's probably the most important for you as a hobbyist to have, especially if you're doing Gunpla or Plamo, and that is panel liner. Now this is the traditional standard panel liner. Tons of companies make panel liner. Tamiya makes one, Mecha Empire makes one. Tons of companies make this. AK Interactive makes some. What this essentially is this is just enamel paint thinned down extremely thin with paint thinner, and then put in a little glass jar with a brush that you'll use for putting it into panels. Now, this is a good thing, but also you have to understand something too, though. This stuff can be a little tedious to use. Practice with it first. Definitely do it on a part you're not super concerned about first that you can paint over. But you can get a variety of colors in the Tamiya. I recommend you get the at least first basic three. That would be dark brown, which is good for like yellow mostly. Black, which is good for everything. I mean, look at most of my wardrobe, but rock bands. Definitely black, always have black for most things. And then dark gray. Dark gray is good for some of your off-whites, some of your more odd colors that black's not going to work because it's going to be too garish or noticeable, and brown is going to just blend in too much. It's a good way to go. Mecha Empire also makes a white panel liner, which I think is really cool. But that stuff can be a little hard to come by. It's a little pricey too. So I would try to find it if you could. I doubt you'll be able to find it though. Now, as you can see, all of these panel liners have a brush in the tip of them. And that brush works well enough. I mean, you're able to get in some intricate details with those brushes. I mean, you're able to just take your Plamo piece or your piece of plow plate that we're going to use here, and you're able to get in some real intricate details. But the issue you're starting to see here is you have a lot of flooding on parts you don't want colored. That's not a problem if you plan on going in and either painting or doing something else, but if you have a piece that you've painted and you don't feel like going in and touching up or adding more paint to it or putting paint thinner over it, this isn't the best option sometimes. If you're straight building, it's a different story. But let me show you a tool that's made for this. Now, this is a tool called a panel line pin. A lot of different companies make these. I bought mine from Display. It's pretty good. But you can also just buy a fountain pen from a hobby store or a craft store. It's going to be about probably $10 cheaper. And in all honesty, it's probably going to be easier to get nibs for. But what this is exactly that. It's a fountain pen that I need to clean. But it's a fountain pen that you dip into the panel liner and then scribe onto the parts with. To demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is we're going to take a little cup and we're going to take a little medicine dropper, and you can get these online in bulk cases. I was able to get these on Amazon, 500 of these for like $10. Super, super easy to use. Very cheap, very easy. I'm going to use the dark brown just for contrast, and also because, well, it's the closest thing to me and I'm trying to reach over a camera. You don't want to use this when you're using the fountain pen option. You just want to take and make sure this is shaken up well. dip this in and pull up just a tiny amount. That may look like a lot, but it's not. Drip some into the cup. Drip the remainder back in here because this stuff's not cheap. You don't want to waste it. Close up your lid so you don't dry up product, obviously. Keep a towel handy because this can get messy. Or wear gloves. I'd probably recommend wearing gloves first, to be honest. But what you can see is that it's now sitting here in this little groove. Since it's sitting in that little groove, what we're going to be able to do now is just go in and intricately scribe into each one of these individual parts, like we would with a pen on paper. Not only is this cleaner and sometimes easier to use, but it also makes cleanup easier and faster. And you can get more satisfying effects out of it too. Like say I want to just add a little subtle bit of shading here under the bricks. I don't have to be concerned about, oh, you know, I need to carefully plan out my next move. I can just add detail under the bricks. You can just scribble here, scribble here, scribble here, scribble here, here, here. And there you go. It's going to look a lot nicer. It's going to lay in better. And it's easier to clean up because you don't have as much of a mess you've made. Now, to clean this, there's a few options. Alcohol is one option. But since this paint is very much enamel based, one thing I found that works the best, this also is a tool you'll want to buy, white spirits. This is just a small little cheap bottle I've been using for years. I'm sure you can tell from the, well, hideous color that it is now. You can also get various other thinners too. It'll do the job, but take it, just dip it in. You don't need a ton, obviously. High compatibility thinner will work too. So will, believe it or not, Mr. Hobby tool cleaner will work as well. But that's if you're going to be using this one time for a project. And you're not going to keep touching the same model with it, because that stuff's kind of like an acetone, so it will damage the model more. But now that this is an option that exists, this is the option I use 90% of the time. This is smoother, it's easier, it just works better for me as a hobbyist. Of course, your mileage will vary, obviously. I mean, if you prefer the brushes, obviously use the brushes. If you have a more steady hand and more patience with the brush, then go ahead. We're trying to get things done quick and sloppy. That's a good way to do it. But also you have to understand something too though. This is going to save you time in repainting or having to clean up. Now, if you're having to, of course, clean up what panel line has leaked out or ink if you use the Gundam marker method, there's a couple of options for you. Now, both these options are viable. Both are good. One's going to damage plastic a little worse than the other though. And that is lighter fluid. You can buy this pretty much anywhere. Walmart, drugstores. I go to a local drugstore to get mine. This stuff's like $2.99 a can for 4 ounces, and I have only used probably like this much of the can since I've owned it, and that's been like 3 years. But yeah, I mean, it's good stuff. It's what you use pretty much to get paint off of plastic. The problem with this is this can damage plastic, especially if plastic that isn't painted, because this stuff can be a little caustic. But what you'll want to do is you'll want to take and just pop this little tip up, make sure you got a thumbnail to use, and you'll just get another little cup. You'll drip a little bit in here, and then you'll put that where it's not going to spill, obviously. Take a Q-tip, sop some up, and then you'll take the part that you've panel lined, and you see this residual, you'll just rub it over. Be gentle, don't put a ton of pressure over it, because if you do, you're going to wipe off all the work you just did. You don't want that. But see how much nicer that looks? That's nice. clean. It's easy to use. Now, the other cleaner and kind of simpler method for overspills is this new invention. Well, I don't really know how new of an invention it technically is, but this is a Gundam marker eraser. Yeah, you can do the same exact thing with that, with this, but this isn't going to damage your plastic. You might have to rub over the same area like 6 times, but you don't use this like you would a marker. What you do is you take this off, you don't have to shake it. Make sure the nib's wet, which it is, and you just rub this onto the parts you need. Don't apply any pressure, just rub it on. Let it set for about, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, depending on how long you need and how bad you've overspilled, and then just rub off the residual with a Q-tip. That's what this is intended for, and it works a lot better. I think it's an easier method, in my opinion. And cleaner. And let's face it, I like to be lazy with my hobbying, so the faster and easier the method, the better. It's also not crazy flammable as a liquid. It's also not crazy flammable as a liquid, so it's not really going to do a lot of damage to your model kits either. The next, and probably one of the most important tools you'll want, is going to be your brushes. As a hobbyist, there's nothing any more precious to you than a brush. The brush is something you're going to need for any part of modeling you do. Miniatures, scale modeling, it doesn't matter. Any part of the hobby, you're going to need brushes. Now, my preferred brand is Atlas. I really like Atlas Brush Co. You can't really see it anymore, it's kind of faded. And I really like my Citadel Artificer brush. This is one of the best brushes on the market, in my opinion. For modeling or miniatures, this thing is wonderful. But also, this is a very expensive brush too, though. I mean, this will cost you a nice penny. This is like a $20 brush on its own. Nice though, nice long handle, fits in the hand good, grips good, holds paint well, holds its tip well. It's made from natural hair, meaning it's going to hold its shape well and it's going to blend well. One thing Citadel does that I like, that I wish more companies would do this, they tell you what step this brush should be used in that it's the most useful for. This is a layer brush, meaning when you're layering up the colors on your model, trying to get the final color or coat that you want, this is the brush you should use. Just a good brush in general, in my opinion. This is a nylon brush. Nylon brushes generally are better for things like some metallics, Tamiya lacquers, alcohol-based paints, pretty much things that aren't water-based that a natural hairbrush would have trouble with. And of course, most of them are going to be weird colors like a white or a pink. I've even seen yellow or teal. But synthetic brushes are good, nylon especially. You'll want a nylon brush. And this is a Princeton Summit round 0 size nib. Pretty much the same size as the Artificer, but I use this more for metallics and certain washes and things, which you will want a brush that's soft for washes, and your best bet's probably going to be a nylon brush. This is a nylon polyester blend. Still a super soft brush that holds the tip well, but it's not going to stain as easy as nylon, and can be a little easier on holding a sharper tip. The tips on nylon brushes tend to fray very easily. These blend brushes tend to be a little more easy to maintain when it comes to tip strength, just like a natural hairbrush will. And it's super easy to use. These are good for pretty much everything. These are good workhorse brushes. This is a small detail brush I use to either do intricate wash work, or I just, in general, like using it. This is a Master's Touch 2050 script brush, size 1 nib, long. And then we have the good old-fashioned polyester. The polyester brush is a rigid, still kind of soft, but rigid brush that's used mostly for things like glues, enamels, some of your heavier chemical lacquers like standard Mr. Hobby stuff. They're not really used for blending. They're more used for like base coating or doing touch-up, or really just doing like, you know, texture work and things. They're not really made for blending, and yeah, they're all right. I wouldn't recommend them immediately, but they're not awful. You will need them either way. I don't typically use polyester. I try to stick to either a blend or natural hair. What natural hair is this. This is sable hair, and what this is essentially, well, it's like ferret hair, basically. And what it is it's very soft. It holds its shape well. If you maintain it and take care of the tip, these brushes will last forever. I've only had one set of these, and this thing's lasted me for like 5 years. This brush is phenomenal. Of course, I also like to alternate and rotate my brushes. I mean, I have an entire cup here of just brushes that I use, varying from dry brushes all the way up to natural fiber brushes to synthetic fiber brushes. You name it, I've pretty much got it in here. And some of these more messed up ones, like this one, and this one, and this one, they haven't been poorly maintained. They're just dry brushes. They're brushes that have started getting knackered and old that I just don't use much anymore because they don't hold a tip well. So I use them for things like washes and dry brushing and blending work and some glue works, adhesive works, resin works, things like that. Now, you want a good brush soap. I would show you that, but I don't have access to it currently. It's all the way on the other side of the room, and I'm pretty much kind of jacked into this camera like a tech priest is. So it's kind of hard to, you know, get up and move around when you're wired here with a microphone. So another option you'll definitely want is brush restorer. This stuff's good. What you'll do is you'll just take the cap off, and you'll take a clothespin and you'll lay it across, and then you'll take and squeeze the clothespin, stick like 3, 4, or 5 brushes in there, set it on top of here, and then let it soak overnight. What it'll do is it'll help maintain the brush's shape, the brush's dexterity, its springiness, and the softness of the hair and natural fibers. Stuff's cheap, you can get it online, it's a good product. I'd recommend you only soak it for about 24 hours. It can damage some nylon brushes, but that's to be expected. Now, that we've covered that, something else you'll want to get, if you do a brush soap, I'd recommend the Master's brush soap. It does smell like mint, which is good. Mint's good. It cleans extremely well. It'll clean damaged or dried bristles to an extent. And unlike the pink brush soap, if your brushes are a little old or caked with paint or are starting to crack a little bit, then that's going to help alleviate some of that problem. But sometimes the brush is beyond the point of repair and you just have to retire it or move on with it. Now, let's move on to a more fun tool, the glue looper. The glue looper is a super fascinating tool. What it is it's a series of loops like this that glue on, that hold glue in this little tiny loop here at the tip, that you then dab onto the intricate parts of your models. How it works is relatively simple. You take any hobby knife handle you have that you're not using, and you take these that come into a pack of 8, and they'll come unfolded. This one I don't mind breaking because it's old, it's knackered, but you'll fold that over on itself. You'll slide that down to your hobby tip handle, and you use this to control how much glue you're putting on a model. This is very nice because there are times when you'll use super glue on resin or pewter models, and you want to be able to be precise like you would with plastic cement because there's a brush but you also don't want to overdo it with the spouts on the super glue and ultimately damage the model by having glue run off and go everywhere. So the greatest thing you can do is this, because once you dab it onto the model, you'll see it dries there in the loop. And then what you're recommended to do in the instructions, carefully make sure you have no flammable liquid around you. Matter of fact, we're going to move the lighter fluid out of the way because I don't need my hobby room to go up in flames. You take a lighter and you just burn out the super glue. Burns out pretty quick. It's not particularly hard to use. And once that's done, it'll clear the tip out. You just let it burn naturally. That way it doesn't, do any damage. It doesn't have to do. It will blacken the tip after a while. And when that happens, basically what you're going to want to do is just throw it out. You get 8 in a pack. They, of course, are mirrored to each other. So you have 2 large, 2 medium on the top and 2 large, 2 medium on the bottom. That's for all your gluing needs. And that lighter trick, that's pretty good. I still think it's a little unsafe myself. I don't generally like doing that with glue. I've had bad experience with that before. I know from experience that fire and hobby stuff generally don't mix, but if you're careful and you make sure you have nothing flammable around you, it should be fine. Just don't mess anything up. I don't want my hobby family getting hurt. Now, it's a good tool. I definitely like it. Of course, again, be careful with it, but if with enough practice and patience and using it outside, of course, you'll be able to alleviate a lot of the problems it has. 2 more options, of course, that we recommend. One of them is pretty simple. It is a pot holder. What this does is the very problematic Citadel pots. These are very round on the bottom. These have a tendency to tip over and they have a tendency to spill. Obviously, what this is made for is a silicone. You can 3D print these as well. And you just want to stick this onto there. It holds it and then it grips tight to your desk so this never tips over. Now, this is a wash. A wash is different from a panel liner. A panel liner is more like an ink or a thinned out enamel or an oil paint, which is usually what panel liners are made from. This is a wash. A wash will not be used specifically for the recesses, but a wash will be used for tinting parts of a model, like adding a slight brown hue or a slight black hue or a blue hue or kind of a purple color or a red color, depending on what you're painting. Like an example of this is on Typhus here. The spots between these hoses, other than being dry brushed, are also a wash. All of the dirty, grungy look here on this handle is a wash. And then all of the little picks, like here, is a wash. Parts around these hoses, like these little holes, show the fleshy bits, are a wash, and the brown color that really accents the bone here is a wash, as well as the blue on the helmet is a wash as well. And the dirtiness of the blade, the dirtiness of the fuel tank here on the back, that's all a wash. That's what washes generally are made for, is they're made for the hobby of miniature painting, to allow you to be able to not only tint certain things to a color, but as you can see, help bring out detail and attention to a variety of models and bring out details that otherwise would be washed out through the paint itself. Washes are something I highly recommend. I do believe that Citadel makes some of the best washes on the market that are water-based and are pretty user-friendly and foolproof. If you guys want, I can make a video explaining how to use them, their different properties, and what they're made for. So if you would like to see that, tell me in the comments. Now, we're going to get a little more technical with the rest of the tools in this video due to the fact that they're things that aren't talked about much, but they're very much needed. And of course, the first and probably the biggest one we're going to talk about is gap filler. For those of you that are unaware of what gap filler is, gap filler comes in a variety of different options, but its name pretty much says what it is. It's there to fill in the gaps on your models. You have two types. You have stuff like green stuff and milliput, which are 2-part epoxy putties. I can put this here and you guys can go ahead and read it if you want to. And same rule on the back. And this will stick to exactly what it says it is. Fantastic stuff. This is more what I would use for like sculpting or modifying a sculpt or changing up parts of the model or making castings of a model. This stuff's about 14 bucks. I think it's like 16 now in 2024. You have two options. You have a superfine white. This is what it's become my preference. It's a little bit less milly and a little softer and easier to use. It'll come in 2 parts. You've got a white stick and a yellow stick. And then what you'll do is you'll take and cut off equal parts of that, knead it together into a little ball, and then use that as your gap filler, or use it to modify your sculpt, which is what I would prefer you use that for. And then you have the standard yellow-gray. It's pretty much an off yellow color. It's kind of a grayish, mustardy color. Same thing. Doesn't say anything any different. So there you go. You can pretty much see what the two different types are for. Super fine is for a little more intricate work. This is for a little more of your heavy duty stuff. Or like a plaster of Paris and less like a adhesive or a sculpting compound. Green stuff is good too, but green stuff is solely there to fill in gaps. So green stuff is not there to fix gapping issues. That's not what it's designed for. It's not really designed to sculpt with either, but people do. But you gotta get it right the first time because it's hard to sand. Now we move on to an actual gap filler. Mr. White Putty, to me it makes a version of this too. I prefer this because this doesn't stink as much. This is kind of the product that got me sold on Mr. Hobby as a brand. But this stuff doesn't stink as much. It's in a much more easy to work with color, which is white, and it dries to a matte finish. Essentially what you'll do with this is you take this, and of course you unscrew the cap. When you buy it new, there's a little aluminum cap over it, but you can see it's essentially polymer in a tube. And you'll pop the little silver cap with this, like you would a can of JB Weld. Then you want to squeeze out just a small amount of this onto a piece of cardboard or polystyrene or something that you know isn't going to dry this out super quick. I can show you an example really quick. Let me get a piece of cardboard. Yeah, I use the back of a color card, that's fine. Wipe it on. And this stuff will begin to dry in essentially minutes almost. And what you want to do is you can then take sculpting tools or a brush and you can wipe a little bit of that off and then put it into the cracks of your models. An example of this is like where you would join together the limbs of a model. Like an example is right here on the arm or right here on the head or right here on the hands where they join together. If you don't want there to be a gap in the parts of the model that you've joined together with glue, you use a little bit of that, rub it into the area, and then before you paint it or prime it, you go in and you sand that area down smooth, and it's going to hide those gaps for you. Now, that's a product I highly recommend, and you'll definitely need if you plan on doing a lot of Plamo, since a lot of older Plamo kits, especially Gunpla, tend to have that problem. Now, of course, one that I forgot to mention in the first video that I'm going to mention here are metal mixing cups. These are good for things like thinners, your lacquer paints, putting your retarder medium into your paints. Pretty much good for everything. I mean, these are multi-purpose. Get your little plastic medicine cups though. Sometimes those will fare a little better for you and work a little better, depending on what you're using it for. If you're gonna be mixing paint for your airbrush, use the little plastic medicine cups like I showed earlier. Simply because that's just easier to use, it's easier to work with. Those little metal cups are more for like, you know, I need to mix something while I'm sitting here, or I need to take like some white putty and mix it with some extra thin cement and get it to a real rough, gritty texture, then put it on like a cape or a base for some crackling or something like that. Make like a leather texture and things. You know, that's what that's good for. I did some here on a model that'll show later, more around October, because it fits the theme. He's become my desk mascot, so that's cool. Then of course you'll want something to help with your painting, which is masking tape. To me, a masking tape comes in these little cool plastic containers. Obviously, I need to put a new roll in here, but I'm just using this for an example. Another easy option for masking, you're going to laugh, is silly putty. You can get silly putty for like $1, and you can see I've already used it to mask off the red color. Stuff's great. You can take it, you can sculpt it around, mold it around something. It'll fit around it, it'll block it off just enough to where you can airbrush around it, and you'll never have a problem with it. If you want to go a little fancier than that, and want something a little more elasticity, elastic putty from AK. And this stuff, when I say it, likes to stick in its can, it likes to stick in its can. If you can get the can open, which I don't think it's going to want to cooperate with me. I don't use this stuff a ton, but basically it looks like flubber or tar in a can. This stuff is super elasticy. As you can see, I had trouble getting the can off because of that. And what you want to do is you take this and you put it, same as the silly putty, onto the model on parts you want to do. The advantage this has is this can be sculpted and molded while it's on the model and manipulated and moved. So you can get a little more accuracy with this and a little better. It's made really for, well, doing camouflage. And it works really well for doing camouflage. Now, of course, there's also something that makes the job of texturing your bases and your dioramas much easier, and that's called a texture paste. Texture paste is essentially an acrylic compound that's made to add texture to a model. Essentially all this is spackle and sand. You could probably make it with spackle and sand, but it's very simple. You take it, you apply it to a base or to a piece of a diorama. It'll dry with a gritty, rough texture. That's what I did on Typhus's base, and it looked great. It just gave this nice, craggly earth effect. Tons of companies make this. Citadel makes one, AK makes one. Liquitex makes a version of this that's just acrylic compound with sand, basically. It's great. I highly recommend this. Definitely a must-buy for your hobby shelf. Then they make a crackle medium, which is, well, as you see, it's made to crackle. This company makes the best crackle medium. I don't really think a lot of other companies make a good crackle medium, but it's a tan color, so it's neutral and easy to paint over. It's also designed to be used as a crackle medium, so definitely use it, let it crack, let it do its thing. I'd stir it up with a popsicle stick first, just to be safe. Now that you've done that, you got that, if you plan on doing any decal solutions, there's always something you'll want when you're doing decal work. And that is a two-part system called Microset and Microsol. You put this on first to get your decal set, and it will help adhere better and curve better along with your water. I'll make a video specifically explaining this, because this stuff's a little complicated to understand. This is the second part that you put over it, and it helps dissolve the film around the decal to create a much smoother and better looking decal. Again, these are getting their own video because they're kind of complicated, and it's just easier I show you guys than attempt to explain it and then mess it up. So, now that that's out of the way, we're going to move on to our final hobby tool that you'll need, and that is something I think everybody should have: a color wheel. Now, this is just a pocket color wheel, but it's pretty straightforward. You have primary colors, intermediate colors, tints, tones, and shades, warm colors and cool colors. And then you have a way to understand the color wheel, or understanding color theory mostly, or color in general. You have complementary colors. The complement of yellow is purple, complement of green is a red purple, complement of standard green is red, blues is orange, etc., etc. Triadic harmonies, meaning these are three colors that will always belong together. Red, blue, and yellow always go together. Sort of a purpley blue, a red, orange, and a light yellow, green go together. Violet, orange, and green, red, yellow, orange, and blue. And split complementary, which means that these also contrast with each other. And as you can see, it gives you this, but it also gives you a little symbol here at the top to understand what you're looking at and what each one of those stand for, and how to read it on the color wheel, which is nice. But also, you have the back of the color wheel that explains value: 100% black, 100% white, and the values in between. Then you have personal palettes for things you've created that you want to use. I've never used this, mostly because I just don't think it's needed, but you have your triadic harmonies, complementary colors, and then it will, of course, give this: basic color definitions. You can pause that and read that if you need to. And that will do it for part 2 of the hobby tool video that I hope I wasn't too long-winded in. Took me a while to really think about all the tools you guys would need as you progress through your hobby journey. Took me forever to figure it out. Took me almost a month essentially to figure out what you guys would need. That's why you're getting it so much later after the first video, but most of that is because it's just been hard trying to tackle work, family stuff going on, and trying to really pick out and find what you could use that you wouldn't just figure out on your own, or that you wouldn't just hear through word of mouth. So hopefully I helped you guys out. Hopefully this was enough. And if you guys think I missed anything, you think that I could do anything else tool-wise or video-wise to help you guys better understand your hobby or help you progress farther into your hobbying journey, let me know. I'm always open for suggestions. As long as it works, I can do it. As long as I have the resources to do it, I will. Now, I appreciate all those of you that have returned. Thank you. All you new viewers, thank you as well. If you're new here, think about subscribing. That definitely helps. Spread this around. Share it with your friends, your family. Share the hobby love. You know, tell people that I helped you out. See if they can help them out as well. You know, we're all a little close-knit family here in the hobby. We want to stick with each other. So definitely help me out. I like helping you guys out. So subscribing helps. Spreading this around through word of mouth helps out. We should be getting back on our regular schedule of 2 a week, starting soon. So got some plans coming up, of course. Got a couple of modeling series planned. But right now I have commissions I have to worry about. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next one.